Feldman, I'm President and CEO of the US-ASEAN Business Council, and the US-ASEAN Business Council is proud to have brought the ASEAN Ambassadors tour to Chicago, and we're very grateful for the University of Chicago, particularly Dean Colm and Steve Edwards and Denise Jorgens for their hosting us this morning. We hope that you'll get something out of it. You'll come away with some new inspiration, maybe to visit Southeast Asia or to do business there or to understand its critical role in the world that we live in today. I've been asked to set the scene a little bit, and before I do that, I just want to give a brief introduction of the US-ASEAN Business Council. We're an organization, a trade association that was formed 30 years ago to help American business grow in Southeast Asia. Today we represent 130 of the largest American companies doing business in Southeast Asia. They include Chicago companies like Boeing, UL, and Motorola Solutions, among others. We continue to move ahead. We've got offices in 6 of the 10 ASEAN countries. And ASEAN, for those of you who don't know, is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It was formed 47 years ago this year, and today represents the 10 countries situated between China and India. So geographically, ASEAN is incredibly important. Strategically, it's important. President Obama just came back from Southeast Asia, where he visited Malaysia and the Philippines. I was privileged to be in both Malaysia and the Philippines, and we have the Philippine ambassador to the United States and the Malaysian ambassador to the United States, who are both also in country with the president with us today. So just to give you a sort of sense of why this region is important, besides its geographic importance and its strategic location between 2 of the largest countries in the world, ASEAN itself is fairly big, 625 or so million people. It is a region that we can talk about as one unit, because next year, on December 31st, the ASEAN Economic Community, indeed the ASEAN Community, will come into existence. That will link trade, investment, and movement of professionals within the 10 dynamic countries of the region, and create a single market. Many people don't know that, but this market is America's 4th largest export market. The only countries that we export more to are our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, and China. And on a per capita basis, the people of ASEAN buy about 2 times as much American goods as their counterparts in China. So ASEAN's been a great friend of the United States. Another important sort of point to think about is we've got a tremendous stake from the American business community in Southeast Asia. It's the #1 destination for American foreign direct investment in Asia. It is $190 billion of cumulative investment, and to put that in perspective, that's more than the U.S. has invested in India, China, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and New Zealand combined. I said that right, combined. So we have a tremendous stake, and that stake is really important. And companies like Caterpillar, another good Midwestern Illinois company, have invested in a number of plants in Southeast Asia. Caterpillar actually has 3 of them. But the important thing for the United States and Illinois is Caterpillar exports from its plants in the United States to supply those plants in Southeast Asia over $1 billion of parts and equipment every year. So $1 billion comes out of the state of, basically out of the state of Illinois, supplying those plants. And that's jobs here in America, and that scenario can be repeated over and over again in the different investments that have been made. So I know you didn't come here to hear from me, but I will just leave you that in addition to everything else I said, ASEAN as a collective economy is got a $2.2 trillion GDP and is the 7th largest economy in the world. So this part of the world is incredibly important. It's a part of the world that most people have not heard of in the United States, and hopefully the Dean and our panelists today will help shed some light on just why it's so important. So thank you for listening, and Dean, I turn it over to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Colm. I'm Dean of the Harris School of Public Policy here at the University of Chicago. And it's a great pleasure and a privilege indeed to welcome you all here for this event jointly between the Higher School and the Institute of Politics. The university has changed, perhaps not quite as fast as the ASEAN countries have changed, but nevertheless has changed significantly over the last number of years. And we will have noticed here at International House, and I should indeed acknowledge our friends at International House as well. Here at International House, we have an increasing number of events attended by an increasing number of our faculty and students. For those of you who don't know, I am myself a foreigner, at least in this country, not of course in my own. From Ireland, I was educated partly in England and therefore spent quite a long time in an institution outside my own country as a student. And I found the experience very rewarding. But also, I think domestic students find the experience of engaging with students from other countries very rewarding. And International House is a beacon of this interaction at the university. In public policy, we now have over 40% of our students, our graduate students, from outside the United States. And personally, I feel that our understanding of policy and our understanding of the complexity of how to deal with issues greatly improves when we're exposed to other contexts, other countries, other political systems, other cultures, and how people in these countries and these systems look at the problems that we face ourselves. This event is particularly welcome, I think. We're honored to have all of the ASEAN delegations here, and four of their representatives are going to speak to us this morning. I would like to make it quite clear that I have no professional knowledge of any kind that's relevant to this morning's proceedings. I see myself merely as a channel to encourage the others to dispense their wisdom. And should I appear to be talking too long, by all means, give a sign and I will stop talking and allow our guests to speak instead. The order in which our speakers will speak, and I will ask them to do so in a moment. We will start with Myanmar. Ambassador Htut is ambassador from Myanmar, a distinguished military career before moving into the diplomatic service. Having been a colonel for 30 years may or may not be the ideal preparation for dealing with other diplomats, although I'm sure either it is or else he will have transcended it in his time in Washington. Ambassador Soukathivong from Laos will be second in order. He was educated at least partly in Russia. I think the only one of our delegation who was trained in Eastern Europe. And he will talk a little about the relationship between individual countries and ASEAN as a group, a question that certainly I think is very interesting and challenging. Ambassador Jose Cuisia from the Philippines comes to us from a career as a banker, former governor of the central bank in the Philippines. Due to some poor advice he got as a young man, he took an MBA at Wharton rather than taking it here in Chicago. But I'm glad to see that he has recovered from that and has finally showed up in the right place. And our fourth representative is the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Vietnamese Embassy in Washington, Mr. Nguyen. He was educated in Hanoi and in Delhi. And we'll talk a little about the AEC and what's going to happen or maybe happen in 2015. So you see we have a wonderful selection of both career backgrounds, places of education, perspectives on the world. And given that we have those, I will now almost cease talking and ask you to welcome our guests this morning. Ambassador Cho, if we could start with you. I believe Myanmar is currently chairing the committee in Washington of the ASEAN countries. Would you like to say a little about how you see this as it moves forward?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Dean Colm. I'm glad to be here with you, and I really appreciate ASEAN Business Council for convening this discussions here. So as the professor has introduced me, my background is from the Army, so I'm a little bit quite reluctant to speak in front of the audience here. And they all said that in the magazine also. So here, we ASEAN ambassadors have come here to meet with you all and to talk about ASEAN as well as ASEAN-US cooperation from the political and economic aspects. So today I'll be talking about what we are doing in the United States and what our main goals and priorities as ambassadors, and how we are cooperating with the US government, business, and institutions. So according to the ASEAN Charter, ASEAN embassies around the world which are beyond our region, the Southeast Asia, are encouraged to form the ASEAN committees in their respective third countries, as well as in the international organizations like UN in New York and in Geneva, in order to promote interest and identity of ASEAN there in their respective host countries and at the international organizations. So currently we have 40 ASEAN committees around the globe. In fact, 20 committees were established even before the ASEAN Charter that ratified in 2008. So among all the ASEAN committees, ASEAN Committee in Washington, so we call it as in short as ACW, was founded in 1978, beginning with 5 countries, I think, and became one of the oldest ASEAN committees in third countries. ASEAN Committee in Washington is comprised of 10 ASEAN ambassadors, all accredited to the United States. So like say ACW actively plays its role so as to promote the interest and identity of the ASEAN in the United States, as well as to enhance the relations and cooperation between ASEAN and the United States. Its chairmen, like ASEAN ambassadors in Washington, we rotate as a chair every 4 months. So like Myanmar is now, recently I'm the chair of the ACW, but I've already handed over to Indonesia, despite Indonesia cannot make it today. That's why I'm co-chairing now at this. So like what are our priorities of ACW, ASEAN Committee in Washington? So we are, unlike individual ambassadors representing their own countries or government having different agenda and priorities, ACW represents whole region of ASEAN, which has a total of a population of 626 million and combined GDP of 2.4 trillion US dollars. For ACW, I would say we have 3 priorities. The first is political, that is to strengthen and enhance existing ties of relations and cooperation with the United States government and also congressional circle based upon friendship and understanding. Our ACW regularly interacts with US government agencies, mainly with the US Department of State. We also occasionally meet with the US lawmakers responsible for foreign affairs, particularly with the Southeast Asia region. The Bureau of East Asia Pacific Affairs, led by the Assistant Secretary, current is Mr. Daniel Russell, is our focal point, and we hold regular meetings with the State Departments. So, meeting with the State Department serves as the main venue of our communication and collaboration on the regional and international matters of mutual interest and concerns. So it provides a domestic complement to U.S. engagement with ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta. On the side of the U.S. government, the United States has rendered its institutional support for ASEAN in a number of ways, in which the ASEAN Committee in Washington is included. At the same time, ASEAN ACW always seeks the meetings with the other U.S. government agencies such as National Security Council staff, Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, Department of Commerce, USAID, and Department of Defense through our official and informal basis. In addition, we also do it through the think tank like CSIS. So in order to enhance the cooperation with the U.S. Congress, while there are a number of caucus linked to some of our individual member states like Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, our ACW is considering upon encouraging the U.S. Congress to launch the ASEAN caucus. The second is economical, and that is to promote two-way trade and investment between ASEAN countries and the United States by seeking ways and means to achieve this end to not only through U.S. government agencies like USTR, Department of Commerce, but also direct contact to the U.S. business companies, particularly in cooperation with the US-ASEAN Business Council and other institutions like U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So we appreciate US-ASEAN Business Council, which plays a critical role in not only assisting our missions in the United States in many ways, including this tour, but also bringing U.S. companies to our ASEAN countries in order to promote U.S. business in our region. So the US-ASEAN Business Council is also trying to help and enable our SMEs to join the U.S. and global supply chain. And the third is related to the ASEAN awareness in the United States and connectivity between the peoples of ASEAN and the U.S., which is also in line with the ASEAN Charter to promote the interests of and identity of the ASEAN in the United States. Not only the ACW as a whole, but also individual ambassadors are trying our best to achieve this end through the public forum and events. For instance, like I spoke about ASEAN and Myanmar at the U.S. institutions, including Foreign Service Institute of the State Department, US-Asia Institute, Asian Society, and University. So we hold ASEAN Day events also like in Washington. Due to our ACW's long and outstanding role in promoting US-ASEAN relations, the US-Asia Institute presented our committee the Dynamic Diplomatic Award as a token of recognition in last March. So I would say that ACW of our 10 ambassadors spare no efforts to expand the US-ASEAN relations and multifaceted cooperation through our consolidated efforts as well as through our individual capacities. So that's all that I know of. The ACW is in Washington. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. It brings to mind, listening to what you were saying, special challenges, I think, for Laos, perhaps as the smallest of the countries on the stage. And there's always a challenge for a small country in deciding whether or not to join a confederation of this kind. The same challenge, in fact, was faced by Ireland in terms of whether to join the European Union or not, some 20 or 30 years ago. So how do you see, from the Laotian perspective, the relationship between what are now the country's interests and what are the interests of ASEAN nations as a whole, and how do you balance these two things? Ambassador Soukathivong?
Thank you, Mr. Colm. As we know, that Laos is a very small and landlocked country. After becoming member of ASEAN, the Lao government has set a goal and plan to join the ASEAN member countries. In ASEAN, we have two groups, the old ASEAN members and the new or the young member. One of them is Laos. According to the situation in the region and in the world right now, we have to group or to form our team. So after becoming full member, Laos try its best to develop the social economy to promote or to narrow the gap between the developed ASEAN and the least developed one. So until now, the Lao economy improved from 2011 to 2013. Our economy reached at 8% per year. At the same time, the Lao government also tries its best to build infrastructures because we are a landlocked country. Right now, we have built a 4 bridge with Thailand. We call the Mekong Friendship Bridge. And one, when we connected with Myanmar, now the construction is going on. And besides that, we build roads, railroads invested by the company of Malaysia. And of course, we have to have connection with air communication. Last year, we start flying directly from Vientiane to Seoul, and so on. Of course, it is a big challenge with the Lao government, but we'll try our best to fulfill our task to reach the goal to build the ASEAN or the ASEAN community by end of next year.
Well, it certainly sounds very promising, and congratulations. I guess the Philippines is in a somewhat different position. First of all, you've had a long relationship with the United States, not all of which I'm sure we need to discuss. From Chicago, which is, of course, the center of the United States, it looks as though the US is changing its attitude to Asia. And there's a lot of talk about a pivot from somewhere else to Asia. The only thing that's clear is where the pivot is going, not so much where it's been. Does this provide a special challenge or an opportunity, or is it just meaningless, just words?
Thank you for that question. First of all, before I answer your question, let me say that you referred to my stint at Wharton. And I enjoyed the interaction with the foreign students as well as with the American students. In my MBA cohort, 70% were from the US and 30% were from various countries, UK, India, the Philippines, Mexico, France, etc. So we had a lot of interaction among the students. But one thing that I distinctly remember is that I had an outstanding professor named Professor Marshall Bloom, who taught us investments, who came from the University of Chicago. Excellent teacher. So I wanted to mention that.
Thank you. We do send missionaries out to the...
But I think he enjoyed himself because he stayed for more than, 20 years at Wharton. Now, with reference to your question, the Philippines welcomes the U.S. rebalance to Asia. And I believe that our other colleagues in Southeast Asia do welcome the rebalance to Asia policy. There's been some skepticism or doubts regarding the sustainability or even the commitment of the Obama administration to the rebalance to Asia policy because of the fiscal challenges and, of course, the attention that has been drawn away from Asia because of the crisis in the Middle East and Europe. But I believe that the rebalance to Asia policy is here to stay because conventional wisdom dictates it. For the following reasons. One, at least a third of the Earth's population lives in East Asia and the Pacific. Two, about a quarter of the global GDP is accounted for by the region. Three, the growth of the region is among the highest among the regions in the world. And at least 26% of the US total exports go to ASEAN. And 40% of its agricultural exports go to ASEAN. Two-way trade between ASEAN and the US is roughly about $1.2 trillion. So you see that there are many, many reasons why that rebalance to Asia policy will continue. The recent visit of President Obama to Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and the Philippines served to reaffirm the Obama administration's commitment to the rebalance to Asia policy. I certainly am convinced that this rebalance will present tremendous opportunities, not just for ASEAN, but also for the US. As Alex already mentioned, the statistics he quoted are very convincing that the rebalance to Asia policy is going to be both beneficial to the US and to ASEAN. And I think President Obama will have further opportunity to reaffirm that rebalance when he attends the East Asia Summit in Myanmar later this year, as well as the APEC Summit in China. So I am quite optimistic that we will see tremendous benefits that will redound to the interests of both the US as well as ASEAN.
Thank you, Ambassador. Cuisia, do you think Vietnam is a somewhat different situation again? Indeed, all of the countries have different history of connection with the US, different economic history, recent economic history. Is the AEC going to be have a special effect on strategy for Vietnam, for the way in which you see the economy and perhaps even the political system developing over the next decade or so?
The AEC will be an important part of ASEAN community building in the region, because you know that the ASEAN leaders have envisioned this community to be resting on the three pillars of political security community, the socio-cultural community, and the economic community. So it is an integral part of the community building in ASEAN as envisioned by our leaders in the later years of the 1990s. And then we put it into the blueprints for implementation in the early of the 2000 and 2002. So it is very encouraging that activities among ASEAN nations since then has been rapidly deployed, and most activities are seen in the building of the ASEAN economic community. And that is why earlier this year our economic ministers have confirmed our determination to finally put this community into practice by the end of next year. That is, and we are looking forward to that point of time to see a new beginning. As we understand, it is a new beginning of our association to move forward in building a stronger and more coherent economic mechanisms for countries in the region. So as the new beginning of a new path ahead, we will have many opportunities and many challenges combined. For instance, with our goals of creating an environment conducive to the smooth flow of goods, services, investment, capital, and skilled laborers, to first and foremost through the establishment of single windows, first and foremost national single window, like we are doing with Laos, and we are striving ourselves to follow the good examples of Singapore to allow the smooth flow of goods and services and investment in the region. That would facilitate intra-ASEAN trades and service and investment that you have already noticed in the recent years that are increasing rapidly. That would be a very good opportunity for businesses from inside ASEAN, as well as people and businesses outside ASEAN, like those from the US, to engage in the economic community building process in our region. But at the same time, as we envision, see that the building of such community will have to take into account the ongoing existing structures or mechanisms like the ASEAN FTAs with countries like China, Japan, South Korea, with India or Australia and New Zealand, etc., as well as the various sub-regional cooperation mechanisms like the triangle development we have with Laos or Cambodia, or the ACMEX cooperation, etc. So that would be a long process before we could, say, come to a stage when the ASEAN economic community could be institutionalized like EU.
So it seems to me that in many ways the ASEAN is following a path somewhat similar to the path of European integration after the Second World War, the coal and steel community, then the common market. Now in Europe, there's been considerable resistance within countries at times, especially at the moment, in fact, in Europe, to the notion of a political integration or a political union among countries. You mentioned that for ASEAN, political integration is a key pillar of the development. Is that something that's likely to cause difficulty? Is it a long-term, short-term? Where do you see this happening? Ambassador Cuisia?
I think the difference is that ASEAN has proceeded more slowly, more cautiously than Europe. And you know, the ASEAN way is using consensus all the time. And perhaps there has been criticism that ASEAN has been very slow. But on the other hand, there has been also less, I guess, conflict. And you know, we have moved slowly, but smoothly and with greater confidence. And so we of course, have not talked about a single currency like sure. Europe. Right? I think we've learned from the I guess, problems that have been encountered by the Eurozone. So I think that's one big difference between the way we have proceeded in ASEAN and Europe.
And Ambassador Soukathivong, Laos seems in some ways most vulnerable to losing its control over its own destiny, being a small country surrounded by larger, perhaps richer neighbors. How do you see maintaining your cultural integrity, your national integrity, are you in danger of being swamped by your larger neighbors and their strange ideas?
I think that no problem for Laos because the Lao government has its policy of peace, independence, friendship and cooperation. So, of course, we have some difficulties, but based on our ASEAN solidarity, unity, and mutual understanding, you know, that makes Laos feel very comfortable to join the ASEAN. And I would like to thank the own ASEAN that you know, support and provide assistance to my country. But from Laos, I can say that we feel very comfortable and we will strongly support ASEAN initiative, ASEAN goals, and will play an active role to maintain peace, stability, and security in the region and in the world at large.
And Ambassador Cho, Myanmar is in also a special position, rapid change in terms of the political structure, the openness of the community in recent years. Is ASEAN going to be helpful or irrelevant in terms of how internal politics develops? And the same would be true, I guess, for other countries in ASEAN. To what extent do political movements in other countries have potential for good or for ill for your own country?
Well, after joining ASEAN in 1998, we received a lot of so many support from all the ASEAN 9 countries, like even in political support, like moral support, like when we were have difficulties, like in the international community, like United Nations, on the issue of human rights and everything. We do have a lot of support from the ASEAN countries, and not only in the area, but also in the economically, like Thailand always have a good economic relations with Thailand, also with like Singapore also. So in any way, like we have this, even we do have the diversity in ASEAN countries, but we have all the support, like we have the ASEAN unity is always, and the solidarity is always like supporting each other countries. So we do have support from all the ASEAN countries when we started joining from the ASEAN. ASEAN in 1998.
That's certainly encouraging. Do all of you feel that, in terms of your diplomatic efforts, that you now tend to think not just of your individual nation, but also of the positions of your fellow members of ASEAN in terms of your foreign policy, or is that something that's not part of your discussions? Ambassador Cuisia?
Well, you know, we do not interfere in the politics of each country, of our neighbors, and however, we are supportive as much as we can about each other's, for example, in the case of Myanmar, the Philippines, as well as some other countries in ASEAN, were first ones to speak for the lifting of the US sanctions on Myanmar as the political reforms were being undertaken. And again, we said to the US that perhaps Myanmar should be given some encouragement by precisely lifting these sanctions so that they can continue with their political reforms. So in terms of our foreign policy, again, each one, of course, we have our own independent foreign policies, but at the same time, we always stress the centrality of ASEAN. And again, as the Ambassador Laos says, we try to encourage the unity and solidarity within ASEAN.
Perhaps we should open the floor to people who have questions. Just to remind you, should you have a question, it should be brief, since people did not mostly come here to hear you speak, but the ambassadors. And respectful, of course, although the word respectful is almost meaningless unless you have a context. So, I'd like to welcome anybody who has... We have a microphone that can transmit the questions across the vast space.
Thank you.
You might introduce yourself, perhaps, briefly.
My name is Paul Berry. I'm a first-year student at the Harris School of Public Policy, specifically foreign policy. I have a question for our delegate from Vietnam today. So, roughly 36 hours ago, there was a collision between a Chinese boat, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. They were trying to set up some kind of oil platform. Can you talk about that in the short term, as well as how that fits into the wider negotiations and interactions you have with China in terms of developing shared space for resources? Thank you.
Yes, that's true that a few days ago, the Chinese state-owned oil company has moved its mobile drilling rigs into plot near our Luzon Island, which is 119 miles from our coast. And then they refused to move on, and they started to have drilling activities. The rig is protected by now some 50 ships, including military ships. So that poses a very serious precedence in the waters of our exclusive economic zone. And that would also pose a danger to, if further actions by China is conducted in other areas of the South China Sea, or which we call the Biển Đông or East Sea of Vietnam, or the Philippines call it the West Philippine Sea. So that is a very dangerous activities, and we are glad that the U.S. government has already made clear in the statement, in the briefing by your spokeswoman, calling this a provocative and dangerous act. We are also calling for the international community to strongly condemn this action. And our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs have already talked to the Foreign Affairs State Council Yang Jiechi about the incidents, calling China to withdraw the rigs from our waters, and that goes to nothing. So we are thinking of how to respond to this. No one wants to have such a tension in your neighborhood, at your door. So, but you know, it is very difficult for us, a small country, much weaker than China, to have any, say, kind of strong action. But anyhow, we will protect our sovereignty and jurisdiction over our waters.
So would you...
well, if I may
of course.
also answer that question. The Philippines has been, in fact, openly stating that we are concerned by the actions taken by the Chinese military, particularly in terms of occupying 3 locations within our exclusive economic zone. They have had presence in the Mischief Reef since 1995. They started off by saying it was going to be a haven for their fishermen. Before long, they had a full garrison that's been established right in that Mischief Reef. In 2012, they had vessels in the Scarborough Shoal or Bajo de Masinloc. And after a tense situation, we decided to de-escalate by withdrawing our vessels. There was an agreement with the Chinese that we would do it simultaneously. Unfortunately, they did not stick to the agreement. We withdrew our vessels, and they continued to remain in that particular location. And more recently, in January 2013, they had again vessels that surrounded a moored Philippine vessel in the Second Thomas Shoal, which was actually wrecked in 1999. So prior to the 2002 declaration on the conduct of the parties on the South China Sea, so technically we did not inhabit an area which was prohibited, because that agreement came later on. So they are basically in 3 locations. And despite many diplomatic attempts to try to resolve the issue, we failed. And this is why we had to go to the arbitral tribunal on the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and file the claim against China. We submitted our memorial end of March this year, and we hope to have a decision by the tribunal probably sometime in 2015. Now, why is this important? And I'm glad to say that the US has supported our going to the tribunal under this arbitration process, because we have said that it is a peaceful means of resolving a maritime dispute, and that is provided for by the Treaty on the Law of the Sea. We have urged China to participate, but they have refused to participate in this arbitral tribunal. We have publicly said that we want to maintain good relations with China, which the US has also said. But at the same time, we expect China to adhere to international norms in terms of respecting the rule of law, respecting freedom of navigation, respecting the principle of unimpeded lawful commerce. Yet, unfortunately, China has not abided by these norms. And this is why we had no choice but to pursue the arbitration process. Now, even if we get a favorable decision, we don't know, of course, who's going to enforce that decision. However, we believe that in the court of public opinion, if the Philippines wins, then we would have a much stronger basis to hopefully have a more reasonable negotiating stance from the Chinese. No? So that's really our objective. But let me point out that in 2013, China was our largest trading partner. So despite these tensions, despite this conflict, we continue to have good commercial relations with China.
Any risk on the land borders with China? China also, of course, has substantial common boundaries with ASEAN countries. Is there any concern that China may also be more acquisitive than you might wish on the land borders? The recent activities of Russia and Ukraine, for example, suggest that large countries occasionally feel that they own pieces of what were previously neighboring countries. Is there... So China clearly wants to own the sea, but is there any comparable concern over land borders with China?
Yes, running with Myanmar, we have a border with China, land border with China, over like the 3,400 kilometers. But despite the border with the long border with the China, like it was when we have this, we resolved the border issue like it was in like 1953 or 54, which I don't remember exactly. But we resolved that problem in peaceful ways, and so China doesn't mean to have like the Russia and Ukraine have been doing. We didn't have the kind of issue in Myanmar and China border, so I don't think China will do that like past in the Ukraine. What's the issue happening in Crimea and Ukraine?
And do you see any role for ASEAN in these kinds of disputes? So is it likely that the ASEAN nations will have a common front with its most powerful neighbors, I guess in particular China, perhaps with India and the West?
We were hoping that ASEAN would take a common stand, but I guess we also understand that each country in ASEAN has to look at their relationship with China, and in most instances, China is the largest trading partner. And so realistically, we find it may be very difficult to have a common stand. However, we're trying to get China to agree on a code of conduct that would apply to all of us. And I think it would be good, not just for ASEAN or for China, but for the entire global community, because what we'd like to see is that peace and stability in the region continue, because the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea is a very important trade route, and I think it is to the interest of the entire global community that we maintain that peace and stability.
Perhaps another question.
Hello, I'm Joshua Engelman, and I'm a first year in the college. So on a slightly different note, I'd like to address this question to the whole panel. The rate of population growth throughout ASEAN nations is very high, even for Asia in general. How do you plan to deal with the increasing energy needs, and do you think the US and the rest of the international community can have any role in supporting ASEAN?
Let me start by saying that, there may be misperception that the population growth is very high. Yes, the Philippines was one of the highest with a 2.3% growth rate, but that has actually come down quite a bit to 1.95%. And the replacement ratio is about 1.7%. Now, one of our advantages precisely is that we have a young working population. By 2015, will probably be about 45 million people. Our median age is 22.3 years. So we have one of the youngest working populations in the region. And this is before Congress passed the Responsible Parenthood Bill, which, people sometimes say is part of the family planning, efforts that the government is pushing. So that was just passed last year. By my own concern is that what is more important is probably providing educational opportunities to the poorer segments of society. It's not the growth rate that is a major problem. As I said, it has already come down quite a bit. Now, obviously, there are groups in the US, like Planned Parenthood, who are still very active in trying to promote a more active family planning, drive. But as I said, because the Catholic Church has strongly opposed that Planned Parenthood, which was still passed by Congress, however, this was somehow diluted by the Supreme Court because there were groups that challenged this bill, and the Supreme Court, while declaring the bill, the law itself constitutional, there were several provisions in the law which were declared unconstitutional. So somehow it has diluted that law, and particularly with regard to the practice of religious beliefs by certain organizations that are not required to adhere to that law.
As for Laos, we have no problem because right now we have only 6.5 million. Comparing with the territory, still we need to increase our population. Comparing with my parents, they had 7 or some families 9 a member of family. But the youngster today in Laos, they want only 1 or 2 kids. So this is the problem for my country too.
I feel confident that problem will be solved one way or the other by the world in general, if not by individual nations. I realize the delegation has other appointments to which they need to go quite soon. So I would like to bring this part of their visit to a close. I'd like to thank Ambassador Kyaw, Ambassador Soukathivong, Ambassador Cuisia, and Mr. Nguyen for coming to talk to us. We look forward to seeing them all again, even if we have to go to Washington or to your countries in order to do it. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Real pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you. Real pleasure. Great job.